Hello, class. So, we have started the play, The One Day of the Year by Alan Seymour. And today I'm going to go deliver the second lecture on this particular play. So, we have already discussed something about Alan Seymour, who is the playwright of this particular play. And then I have already told you about the setting of this play, how the war memories are still fresh. Then I have also discussed Anzac Day, something on which the play is based upon. Okay, so today we are going to delve deep into the uh, setting of this play. That means what was Australia like in the late 1950s, how it was a changing country. So, very first thing, working class versus upper class divide. Now, in 1950s, in late 1950s of Australia, you can find that working class and upper class division was very strong. Okay, in this particular play, that we are reading, we have the family of Alf, who lived in a very small house, and Alf himself he drove a lift. Okay, so money was very tight for them. But at the same time, we have another character named Jan Castles, who comes from rich eastern suburbs. Okay, that means she uh, is from somewhere where people have big houses, where people can afford private schools, where people like university is something very easy for her, right? So these two worlds almost never mix, and this you can find in Australia as well. Then the second thing, huge respect for diggers, that is their soldiers. See, in the 1950s, almost every family had someone who must have fought in World War First or World War Second or both. ओके अभी कल अपने को मैंने बताया भी था कि ज़्यादा समय नहीं बीता है राइट प्ले की सेटिंग डेट है 1958 से 1959 which means it is only 43 years after Gallipoli campaign and only 13 to 14 years after World War II ended, right? So that means in each and every household you can find some ex-soldiers. Okay, now these ex-soldiers were treated like heroes, and the very questioning that this Alan Seymour does in this particular play, questioning the Anzac Day, felt like insulting your own dad or grandfather. Okay, so this you can find even in this play. So in those time, in late 1950s, it was quite insulting for the elderly people how you are able to question Anzac Day, and because of this reason this particular play was even banned, let me tell you. Okay, we are going to do that again. Right now let's be focused. So next point is lots of British immigrants or pommies. So there were lots of British immigrants who were known as pommies were arriving, and after the war Australia wanted more people, so hundreds of thousands of British people moved there. There were some working class Australians like Alf who felt that these new arrivals looked down on them, and they still acted like Britain owned Australia. Okay, then we have Anzac Day in the, yes, we should discuss what was Anzac Day like in the 1950s. See, Anzac Day in the 1950s was very different from today. Why? Because it was mainly old soldiers' day, right? There were dawn services taking place, dawn services, and these dawn services were very small, often just the veterans themselves. Okay, there were big marches and huge crowds we see today didn't really start until the 1990s and 2000s. जो अभी हम लोग देख पा रहे हैं 1990s, सॉरी 1950s में इतनी भी ज़्यादा भीड़ नहीं हुआ करती थी, इतने ज़्यादा मार्चेस नहीं हुआ करते, सिर्फ जो वेटरन्स हुआ करते थे, इट वर द वेटरन्स ओनली हु यूज टू सेलिब्रेट द एंजैक डे. ये तो 1990s और 2000s के बाद हुआ है कि एंजैक डे बहुत ज़्यादा अच्छे से हम लोग वो लोग सेलिब्रेट करना स्टार्ट करती हैं. ओके, देन also after the march many ex-soldiers used to go to the pubs and used to get very drunk together. ठीक है, and this was something accepted as letting off steam. जैसे एक तरीके से दे आर नहीं बोलते हैं कि मैं ड्रिंक इसलिए कर रहा हूँ ताकि मैं गम भुला सकूँ, तो ही दीज सोल्जर्स वर डूइंग द सेम थिंग. दे give this justification that they had seen terrible things, which is actual. Of course it is actual. वर्ल्ड वॉर में काफ़ी बुरी बुरी चीज़ें देखने को मिली थी इन लोगों को. Those who got saved, they were traumatized throughout their lives, right? So they said that they have seen terrible things, and This Anzac Day was their one day to remember all those mates who died in the war. So that is why were they used to intoxicate themselves so that they can let off the steam. Okay, so almost no one criticized this drinking thing publicly. Okay, and to do so felt like spitting on the diggers, isn't it? ऐसा लगा कि मजाक उड़ा रहे हैं डिगर्स का, दैट मीन सोल्जर्स का, तो इसी के लिए कोई इनको कुछ बोला नहीं करता था. ओके. Then there had also been big changes in young people and universities. For example, in late 1950s, there were more working class kids. Like in this play, also we have the character Yuji, who started going to university for the first time because of new scholarships, and they used to meet rich kids like Jan, who began questioning the old ideas. Why do we keep on celebrating a war that we lost? Like I told you, Gallipoli campaign kya hua tha, haar gaye the ye log. Even then they're celebrating it, right? Now they were celebrating the courage that they have shown, right? But then young people, they were questioning this thing. जब हम लोग हार ही गए थे तो सेलिब्रेट क्या कर रहे हैं हम लोग? Right. So, is all this talk about the Anzac spirit just old fashioned nationalism? Or shouldn't we be against war instead of glorifying it? तो ये सारे टाइप के narratives उठ रहे थे, सारे टाइप के questions सब एक दूसरे से पूछ रहे थे. Okay, so this was the beginning of the 1960s youth rebellion, you can say, right? Which is going to explode later. That means you can, like, you can think of different uh, protests that happens, right? Then why the play shocked Australia in 1960 to 1961? नॉर्मल सी बात है, एंजाक डे को सब कोई काफ़ी रिलीजियस माना जाते थे, राइट? दे यूज टू praise it, they used to appreciate this day. But then in this play we get to see the other side of this day, right? So it showed Anzac Day as like in this particular play, Alan Seymour has shown it as a this day, Anzac Day, as a drunken mess, and called the Gallipoli story a waste through his characters. So it showed a son, which is in this particular play, it is Yuji, who is openly arguing with his war veteran father, that is Alf. Okay, and the returned soldiers groups RSL, they were furious and they tried to get the play banned. Okay, so the moment this play got into the public, they were very angry, these returned soldiers groups, which is also abbreviated to as RSL. They were extremely angry that how can you insult the Anzac Day? Okay, and that is why they tried to get this play banned. And there were newspapers. So this particular play had been very controversial. There were newspapers who called it un-Australian or disrespectful. Okay, so because of this reason, the first production was cancelled in Adelaide because of threats. Okay, and it finally opened in a tiny theater in Sydney with police standing by the case, by like they were standing in case there is any trouble. Okay. Now what happened later? See, by late 1960s and 1970s, I would say especially during the Vietnam War, there were many more young people who agreed with Yuji's doubts about war and nationalism. Okay, so the play went from being hated to being called a modern Australian classic. Okay, and today it is studied in schools and performed regularly because it shows the exact moment when Australia started openly arguing about what Anzac Day really means. Okay, so why the play matters? See, in 1958 almost nobody dared to say this thing out aloud ki maybe Anzac Day has some problems. So but Alan Seymour, he put that argument on stage, and that too inside an ordinary family kitchen. Okay, so he showed that loving your country and loving your parents doesn't mean that you have to agree with everything that they believe in, Okay, so there you can, in this particular play, you can see fights between Alf and Eugene, the father and the son, who were into their Australian homes fighting over the Anzac Day in the late 1950s. So the play just made the country face the debate. Okay, and that is why more than 60 years later, also, the one day of the year, the play, is still one of the most important plays Australia has ever produced. इसी के लिए इनको इतना ज़्यादा माना भी जाता है. Okay, then coming to the genesis of the play, see, uh, okay, let me tell you some thing about how this play came into existence. Okay, so in 1955, when Alan Seymour was living in Summerhill in Sydney, he walked home on Anzac Day and saw tired, drunk soldiers lying in the gutters and on nature strips from after the celebrations. Okay, and the whole sight shocked him. He felt that the day had turned into an empty, romantic ritual that stopped people talking honestly about the real cost of war. उनको ऐसा लगा ये सब कुछ shallow है. Okay, everything is hollow and romanticized, and they are not trying to have an honest discussion on war. ठीक है, ड्रिंक करके पड़े हुए थे, दे वर इन गटर्स, दे वर इन नेचर स्ट्रिप्स, वही नाले वाले में पड़े हुए थे. ओके, सो in 1958 he wrote this play, the one day of the year, for a competition, hoping that it is going to be staged at the 1960 Adelaide Festival. Okay, but instead, what happened? The festival banned it. Why? Because many people thought criticizing Anzac Day was un Australian, was something disrespectful, was something offensive. Okay, so a few months later, what happened is there had been an amateur theater group in Adelaide who bravely put it on anyway. Okay, and this play was a smash hit, and therefore it soon moved to Sydney, then to London, and was later turned to into television dramas. So strangely, while writing to challenge the old diggers' beliefs, Seymour too ended up feeling deep respect and almost love for the tough, quiet way that generation had survived for depression and hardship. तो starting तो सिमोर ने उसी बात से किया था. He was very disappointed to see the after effects of the Anzac Day. जितने भी सोल्जर्स थे वो गटर्स में मिल रहे थे, कोई कहीं मिल रहा था. बट फाइनली जब प्ले पूरा लिख लिया और जब प्ले हैड बीन हिट in the Australian continent, it is then that Seymour also started to feel some sort of respect for the people who were a part of wars. Right? Anzac Day इसी के लिए तो celebrate करते थे. Okay. Now, coming to the play. Sorry. So let's have a discussion, small discussion on the main characters of the play, and then we are going to go for the summary. Okay. Now, the very first character we have is Alf Cook. So Alf Cook is in his mid 40s, and he has fought in World War II, and right now he works. Now the play starts where he works as a lift driver in a city building. Okay, and he uh, he's a proud working class man. Okay, he's a proud working class man who loves Australia fiercely, but at the same time, deep down, he feels very bitter. Why? Because the war gave him nothing except bad memories. So, after years of hard work, he still lives in a small house and never became the engineer he once dreamed of being. Right. So, Anzac Day is the one day he feels important and respected. Then we have the character of Dot Cook, who is Al's wife and Eugene's mom. Okay, now she is the heart of the family, who cooks, cleans, worries, and tries to stop everyone from fighting, like a mother figure, right? So she didn't go to war herself, but lived through the fear and hardship while Alf was away on the war. Okay, so that is why she understands both her husband's pride and her son's new ideas. And all she wants is for the family to stay together and not tear itself apart. Okay, then we have the character of Yuji Cook. Now, Yuji is a 20 years old boy and the first person in this particular family to go to university. So he is a very bright, angry, and full of new ideas from books and lecture.